So, as the offseason officially pretty much wraps up at the end of the draft, we pretty much know who's going to be on what team and the direction a team's going. And for the Steelers, I felt like since it was such a hectic, non-normal offseason for in terms of Pittsburgh standards, I have to give you guys a grade, and we got to break this thing down a little bit. So I'm going to go down and give my official Steelers offseason grade. First, let's bring up what I thought were the key things we needed going into the offseason. Our priority list. I had it down to 5 different positions we'll say positions. 5 different positions. Here was my order of priorities going into the offseason. Starting with number 1, we needed an offensive coordinator. Matt Canada was a dumpster fire. We then had a 2-man system of offensive coordinators. One guy would call the play, the other guy would send the play to him. It just is not the way you want your offense to work. Number 2 was a middle linebacker. We needed somebody, and obviously this was due to injuries, but even when Cole Holcomb was healthy before he had his season-ending injury, you don't want Cole Holcomb being your best middle linebacker. He's a guy that you want is probably your third guy, your rotation player, somebody who can come in and play a few snaps, give your starters a rest. Not a guy you want to lean fully on to be that guy at the position. Number 3, I'm going to go O-line. I mean, we really need to get that going. Last year we made some signings to the position that didn't really pan out the way we thought they were going to. We didn't build through the draft at all through that, other than Broderick Jones, our first-round pick. We got him at left tackle, which was, I thought, a stellar move. Not a sexy pick at all, but a necessary pick. He didn't do too well at left tackle, but towards the end of the season, he started making his mark as a right tackle, and I felt like his progression was where it needed to be. Nonetheless, we still needed to fill some gaps and holes in the lineman position, specifically center, but we'll get into that later. Number 4, I have the cornerback position. We have Joey Porter Jr., who had an excellent rookie year, I think. It couldn't have gone much better. His big shining moment of that season last year was his pick against against Lamar Jackson on Odell Beckham Jr. against the Ravens to help seal up that victory for us. I think we're fine on that spot, but we need to find a cornerback on the other side, and not just any random Patrick Peterson or some old veteran guy. We need someone who's going to be there for possibly the same amount of time as Joey Porter. It doesn't have to be as talented. It doesn't have to be as good. But someone who can come in and play the position a little bit better than what we've been getting the last few years. And we've been trying to make it work with 5th-round picks and 4th-round picks. I think we needed to come in and either snag a big free agent or someone in the draft early. We'll get into that, obviously, later. And number 5, the QB position. I'm just going to leave it at that. We'll touch on that a lot coming up. But let's start off with the offensive coordinator. Pittsburgh decided to hire Arthur Smith, the Falcons' ex-head coach, who really did not have a good run in Atlanta at all. It was just a dumpster fire. My initial thoughts to the hiring, I was not excited about it at all. I thought it was a dumb move. I thought it was bad. I really did not like how Arthur Smith handled the Bijan Robinson situation. I mean, you got a guy who you took in the top 5 of the draft, a running back who you took in the top 5 picks of the draft, and he only gets the ball 214 carries, while his second string gets the ball 186 carries. That's a total of 32 carry difference between the guy you took number 1 overall and the fifth pick to his backup. That just didn't make sense to me. I thought the usage of Bijan Robinson was a big questionable call. Why wouldn't that guy play more? Why wouldn't you give him more carries? Why is Tyler Algier almost the same usage rate as Bijan Robinson? So that in my mind was like, oh God, we got that guy. But as I, did more research and you kind of let the initial feelings disappear, so to speak, I kind of started to dig into who exactly Arthur Smith was. And going back to his Tennessee days, he handled that offense very well. with the usage of running the ball to set up the pass. I do like that a lot. That was kind of Matt Canada's thing that he was supposed to do. I know he used a lot of motion. He didn't do it very well. Whether that be because of his play calling and his scheme, I think that had a lot to do with it. But I also think the player, our roster had a lot to do with it. Well, we didn't have the guys that we needed to be able to perform any kind of offense at all, specifically on the line. But nonetheless, Arthur Smith, a guy who's going to disguise the run to set up the pass. Everything looks the same. He wants big physical linemen. He wants to be able to run the ball down your throat, which is Pittsburgh to a T. Also, he's a guy that really, really wants his receivers to have effort in the blocking game, which I agree with totally. And I think that was a big reason why we moved Deontay Johnson to Carolina. Deontay Johnson, for as good of a route runner and receiver he may be at times, he always had that mark of being not an effort guy, was not a great blocker. There's multiple film on him just having terrible effort, just no kind of awareness at all. So I think that was a big reason why we got rid of him. But nonetheless, the mindset of him wanting receivers to block and giving effort, I love that. I absolutely think Pittsburgh needs more of that, specifically in the last 5 years. We haven't had many guys that are willing to give effort on that specific stuff. He's a team-first guy. He's willing to start the player who's willing to give more effort, even if he's a little bit less talented, which could be a bad thing. Maybe that's why Bijan Robinson didn't necessarily get as many carries as I felt he should have. But that's his MO. He is a full-on effort, smash-mouth football guy, and he's going to be driving that same mentality into our young players that we have right now, which I like. So, as I digress and I thought about it more about who Arthur Smith was, I took away the shield of his stain of a year in Atlanta. And yeah, I'm not super excited about the hire nonetheless, but I feel a lot better than I did initially. I'm going to give the OC hire a B- grade. Again, I thought we could have did, I don't like hiring old coaches. I would rather see someone new, young, more hungry, so to speak. But nonetheless, Arthur Smith is going to be a good fit for Pittsburgh, and I think the whole Pittsburgh Steeler culture will benefit from the hire. So yes, a B- is what I give that. Moving on, we'll go to the middle linebacker position, and we could not have done any better than what we did by signing Patrick Queen. He's a day one starter. Although he was a Raven, he is now a Steeler. We'll see how that works out. It's kind of an awkward situation. But nonetheless, a guy who's a top 5 middle linebacker, arguably in the game right now. Going to be an immediate starter, an immediate impact on the field, barring injury. But no, I think we absolutely nailed it. I thought there was no chance we go out and get a guy like that. Because Pittsburgh, we don't do that in the offseason. This was an offseason that was... It was so shocking to see the names and the updates that were coming to my phone about potential landing spots for different players, and to actually make the signings like Patrick Queen and then Russell Wilson that we'll get along to a little bit later. It was just different. I mean, Omar Khan really set out to make a difference in this offseason, and he definitely did. But we nailed this middle linebacker position, and not just because of Patrick Queen, but because of Peyton Wilson, the NC State linebacker, who pairs well with Queen. The guy's a speed demon. He can run sideline to sideline, but he's a little bit faster, and he can cover people, say a tight end or a slot receiver, a lot better than Patrick Queen can. Because that's something Patrick Queen's not necessarily... He's capable of doing it, but that's not his strong suit. We don't want him worrying about covering guys. We want a guy like Peyton Wilson who has the athleticism of probably one of the best athletes in the league. I mean, this guy played lacrosse, he played football, he played wrestling. He wrestled. The guy is a stud. The only thing that his knack is, it's a high risk, high reward kind of situation. He already has 2 ACL surgeries. There's rumors that he doesn't even have an ACL in one of his knees. But the fact that he still had those injuries and he still put up the production that he did in college, maybe that's a sign that this guy's just a freak athlete who can do it all without a goddamn ACL. I mean, that's what that situation is. I like it. I think we really dominated the MLB position. MLB, the middle linebacker position in terms of signages and drafts and stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and give it an A grade. We nailed it. Nothing else to speak on with that. I think that's pretty cut, clear, and dry. Moving on to the offensive line, we drafted left tackle Troy Fautanu out of the University of Washington. What can I say? I mean, you want to talk about a perfect scenario? You want to talk about dreams coming true for not only a team, but for a young man who his whole life was a Steelers fan, was a Troy Polamalu fan. Most Islanders are, specifically Samoans. Shout out. Grew up a Steeler fan his whole life. Going to be a team first player right off the bat. I mean, think about that mindset going into it. You don't need to adapt this new culture into. You don't need to adapt into a new franchise's culture and stuff. Because if you're a Steeler fan, you get drafted by the Panthers. You got to make a big change in terms of, oh God, now I got to root for the Panthers. That's a whole different organization, whole different culture. That's a whole shift in itself. Without even getting to the shift from college to football or from college to NFL, it's already set and dry that he's a Steeler fan. He's a team first guy. Not to mention the guy can move. He's a left tackle, but he can play any position that we're going to need him to play besides probably center. An immediate starter, able to move fast, and a day one Steeler fan. There's not much else that needs to be said about it. I think that was a perfect first round pick. Again, not a sexy pick, not something that's going to really sell jerseys or anything, but a necessary pick, and I think it's going to really pay off for us in the long run. Besides that, we did draft a guy, Zach Frazier, center out of West Virginia, and also a guard, Mason McCormick out of South Dakota State. Those guys are bruisers. I like how we didn't go out and sign people, old veterans and stuff like that, who don't really have much left to offer. I like how we built the line through the draft. One out of those three guys is going to be not just a Pro Bowler, but a generational type lineman, I believe. I think we nailed it on that. I'm going to go ahead and give it an A grade for the O-line. Moving on, we have the cornerback position, which is something we needed to fill. Like I said, Joey Porter, we have him, but what are we going to do on the other side? Our team's just going to be picking on that guy on the other side? What we did is we moved Deontay Johnson for Dante Jackson to Carolina and also exchanged picks. Dante Jackson, yes, he is a starter. He's not a Pro Bowler or a guy who's going to, get 7 picks or have a crazy cover rate or, he's not that. He is simply a starter with experience. That's the best way I can put him. He's fast. He can, make turnovers happen, but ultimately it was very underwhelming. We also coupled that with a 6th round draft pick, Ryan Watts out of Texas. He's 6'3", 207, a big, long guy who is probably going to take some time to develop, obviously. He may not develop into anything. We'll have to see. We didn't make many moves towards the cornerback position, not as much as I like, so overall I give that a C grade. Now we're going to get to the big one, the QB position. I had this as my 5th biggest priority going into the offseason simply because I thought Kenny Pickett was still the guy. I thought even though Mason Rudolph came in and started against Buffalo, even though Kenny Pickett could have, because he was healthy enough, I still felt like he didn't necessarily get a fair shake after we fired Matt Canada. His first game against Atlanta, we went and he got injured. That was his only game without Matt Canada. So we really couldn't see what Kenny Pickett was without that big shadow of Canada hanging over him. I still felt like he could still be the guy. Turns out I was wrong because we ended up signing Russell Wilson. Now I'm going to break this down a little bit. My initial response to Russell Wilson being signed, well, I hated it. And it wasn't necessarily due to his performance on the field as much as it was my hatred for him. Now let me break this down. I'm a Steeler fan. I'm a Steeler fan who grew up in Washington State. Okay? In 2005, when the Pittsburgh Steelers beat the Seattle Seahawks in the Super Bowl, I was immediately thrust into a position at a young age, 8 years old. Immediately thrust into a position of defense every time I seen a Seahawks fan at all. If they seen that I had a Steeler jersey on, even at 8 years old, these Seahawks fans are ruthless. They don't care who they're talking shit to. I remember being 8 years old arguing against grown-ass adults about how those penalties or Ben Roethlisberger, oh, he snuck it over the line, it shouldn't have been a touchdown. I had to argue that none of that mattered. The outcome would still be the same, even if Ben didn't get that touchdown. Even if a couple little penalties didn't occur, the outcome would still be the same. So I grew up hating Seahawks fans. And because I grew up hating Seahawks fans, in turn, I'm going to hate the Seahawks too. So time went on. It's from 2005. And from about 2008 to about 2012, the Seahawks were trash. Terrible. There was no 12th man walking around. There were no Seahawks jerseys. There were none of this. Nobody. I went to school with guys who were fans of other teams because simply they could not root for the Seahawks because of how bad they were. Then the big boom. The big bang happened for Seattle. Russell Wilson, Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor. The Legion of Boom. Everything started to come together, and guess what? They started to become a competitive football team. And you know what happened? All of these random people are all of a sudden Seahawks fans. All of a sudden, the whole fucking state is lit up with Seattle Seahawks fans. Bandwagoners. People who weren't there when Tavares Jackson was leading them at the helm. People who weren't there when they had to deal with a guy that looked like Jesus, Charlie Whitehurst, was leading their team. You know what the worst kind of person is in sports for any diehard sports fan out there who loves the team? You know what the worst kind of person is? A bandwagon fan. And we were full of them here in Washington State. Absolutely full of them. Guys I went to school with who were Falcon fans or, oh, I like the Eagles. All of a sudden they're wearing Seahawks jerseys. Russell Wilson jerseys. And they're coming at me talking shit about Pittsburgh. Where were you the past 4 fucking years, dude? I've been a Steeler fan since I was fucking 1 year old. You're a Seahawks fan because now you guys have a winning record? And you're going to come at me like you're as excited about your Super Bowl as I was when the Pittsburgh Steelers won? Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. Absolutely not. So the big boom happened, and everybody loves Russell Wilson. You know who didn't? Us real fans in Washington State, because let me break it down. Russell Wilson winning in Seattle meant the bandwagon fans talked more shit. So inevitably, I had to hate Russell Wilson and hope he lost and did all these bad things so that the bandwagoners could realize they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. So I grew up my whole life not liking Russell Wilson, hating Seattle, and that stain of hating Russell Wilson had carried on past his time in Seattle, even to Denver. So when I seen that we signed Russell Wilson, I was thinking, Jesus Christ, I'm living in a nightmare. There's no way, not in a million years did I ever think the Pittsburgh Steelers would sign Russell Wilson. So initially I was pissed. This is a waste of time. This is a waste of money. This is just everything that could have went wrong, went wrong. But then I started to look at it. Much like the Arthur Smith situation, but a little bit higher of intensity. I started to look at it, started to look at the numbers, started to kind of, after months of therapy and heavy drinking, I finally realized, you know what, this is probably not the worst move at all. Considering the fact we're not paying him shit. Considering the fact I have as much faith in Russell Wilson at QB this year as I did Kenny Pickett last year. The only thing is that Kenny Pickett had a future. Russell Wilson, he's got 2 more years left, so it's kind of awkward. But we're not paying him much. So I kind of, gathered myself and realized, you know what, we're not paying him much. He had a decent year statistically in Denver last year. He was overshadowed by that whole catastrophic end to the year, so to speak. I mean, Sean Payton wasn't really invested in Russell Wilson. The Denver Broncos were just a dumpster fire, and that kind of overshadowed the fact that he had a pretty decent year statistically. Now, will that carry over? Who knows? I'm hoping it does, obviously. But we're not paying him much, and he's going to give the same level of play that I thought Kenny Pickett would last year. Hopefully a little better. Then we went out and traded Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett wanted out. I was shocked. I mean, Kenny Pickett, you're a 26-year-old guy, and you got scared of a 35-year-old Russell Wilson getting traded and taking your job. You didn't even want to try and compete for it. You just wanted to up and leave. I was blinded by Kenny Pickett. I was wrong about him. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I was wrong about Kenny Pickett, and it really showed when he wanted to get out because Russell Wilson came. He didn't want to fight for his job. He didn't want to do anything. Quite frankly, in the words of Mike Tomlin, we want volunteers, not hostages. If you don't want to fucking be here, get out. Boop, go to Philly. And I don't get why he even wants to go to Philly. What do you think, you're going to start in front of Justin Fields, dude? No, you're going to be a backup for the next 3 years until you're probably going to get released somewhat, and your career's tarnished. You had something great here, Kenny. You ruined it. I'll digress from that. Moving on to the Justin Fields trade. There have been rumors that we were in the talks of that leading up to it. I overall like it. Justin Fields was put into a terrible situation with Chicago. He was already facing an uphill battle since he came to Chicago. I mean, you got to think, being a Chicago, and Caleb Williams is going to go through this too. You guys think Caleb Williams is going to come in and be Aaron Rodgers? Dude, he's already facing an uphill battle. The Chicago Bears, there's a reason why they haven't had a fucking franchise QB ever. It's because their organization sucks. It's the top guys. It's not the bottom guys. It's not the players. It's the top guys. There's certain organizations that just don't know what the fuck they're doing. Chicago is one of them. And Justin Fields had to go into that situation. Was it pretty? God, no. Turnover galore. But he did have a spark. He did make plays that made you think, oh my God, that's why he's a first-round draft pick. Now he's coming to Pittsburgh. Storybook franchise. Playing for Mike Tomlin. Probably the best players coach in the league. Schematically, I'd say he's probably below average, but a guy who everybody wants to play for. And he's coming in, he's not going to have to be a starter. He's going to sit behind Russell Wilson. He's going to learn a few things from the veteran that he never really got to do in Chicago. He didn't probably learn anything in Chicago other than, God damn it, I got to run for my life, make a play, or I'm going to get booed out the fucking stadium. So I like the Justin Fields trade. I really do. I think if we can hone in his talents and really start limiting his turnovers and his ways of trying to extend plays and holding on to the ball, I think he can be a pretty decent quarterback. Probably an elite quarterback for a year or two if he keeps his athleticism. So overall, I'm going to give the QB offseason grade a B. Just a B total. I think we didn't do anything. Well, we did do something crazy. We did two things crazy. But overall, I think we're in a better situation we were this year than we were going into the season last year with Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, and Mason Rudolph. So I'll give it a B. Overall, the Steelers offseason grade, I'm going to go ahead and give it a B+. I think we did very well at many positions. We could have did better at cornerback, obviously. We didn't go the route I wanted to at QB, but ultimately we are in a better position. So the overall season grade for the Pittsburgh Steelers offseason is a B+. Book it.